Have you got water and stuff in case you need
Yeah,
it?
I'm all sweet. I'm good to go.
Awesome. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Wave Running Podcast. It's been a while, as I always say in front of the episodes, but today we're joined by Kieren Tall, who's got some pretty handy PBs. I believe it's 3:49, 8:05, 13:50, 28:47 in the 15, 3K, 5K, 10K, which is very, very quick, as you can tell. And we'll unpack his brain a little bit. And also, he has gone through some pretty big ups and downs, so we'll go into detail on that as well, as much as he's willing to. So, yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Soda. I'm excited to be a part of this. And for everyone here, thank you for listening.
I know that you have had like a bit of a triathlon background when you were little. That's all I've heard. But yeah, talk about how you got into running and where the triathlon kind of fit in.
Yeah, so I do come from a triathlon background. Triathlon was my main sport since I was a kid until I was really 19 or 20, which is at that point I just made worlds cross country. I had been on a few Australian teams for triathlon and duathlon too, but at that point I decided that while I was probably equally talented at running and cycling, my swimming was a bit lacking. So I kind of pointed myself in the direction of running because two main reasons. One, I thought I had a better chance of making it as a runner and I enjoyed it more. And two, I wanted to have a career outside of sport. So I thought that running would give me a bit more time to do that.
I think it's pretty cool that in the Sydney running community, a lot of you and guys around your level have grown up together. Is that like true?
Yes. So I've grown up racing Josh and Ed and a lot of these other guys too, like Ollie Hall, Morgan, Harry McGill. There's so many I could name. I could name literally 20 or 30 guys that we've been racing each other at state and national level since we were little kids. I've been doing triathlons with some of these guys since I was about 7 or 8. So it's pretty cool to see the progression and now some of these guys at the Olympics and they're, doing really well.
Yeah, for sure. When you think about all those names, like it's pretty crazy. Like I completely forgot that Morgan and Ollie were part of the picture as well back then. And now they're obviously doing some amazing stuff overseas and also
Oh, yeah.
during college at Wisconsin. So yeah. And I also want to know, like, is there a reason why you decided to not go to college in the US? Because that's kind of a pathway that a lot of good runners like yourself like to take.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly kind of wish did go to college now, but at the time when I was getting some of the offers, I was still a triathlete. So I wanted to keep pursuing triathlon, and I thought that at the time that's what I wanted. In retrospect, I probably wish I had gone to college and not have to drop a lot of money on a uni degree over here. But yeah, I think, everything happens for a reason. I've gone and done almost finished a degree here. So yeah, I think at the time it was just a personal decision of where my goals were. Coming
Yeah.
back to the actual college thing though, a lot of those college guys, we almost had our own little college system when we were at school. Like you could line up and race some of the best runners your age in Australia in a CAS GPS race almost every weekend. So you'd go somewhere in Sydney on Saturday morning and you'd be lining up next to myself, Ed Goddard, Ed Trippers, Ollie Hoare, Cam Griffiths, sometimes Morgan McDonald, and many, many more of the Fryer boys. Plenty of these guys that are now, Australian representatives, Olympians, etc. And you literally get to just race these guys for free. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, there are a lot of people like you who have decided to stay in Australia because they like it as well. So you're definitely not part of a minority. It's just like people go in different directions, I guess. And yeah, what I want to know is a bit more of your progression as well, because obviously you've got into some pretty crazy times over the years. And I guess you seriously peaked really hard in 2021-ish, I want to say. But
Yeah.
yeah. Let's kind of talk a bit about the progression and then move on throughout the timeline.
Sure. So when I first started running, I wouldn't say I was particularly talented. Like my first school cross country, I came barely top 100 and I was quite pissed off about that. So I trained for the whole next year and I won it the next year in year one. I guess gradually, both through triathlon and running, as I was really young in my primary school and early senior school, I was just climbing up through the levels, trying to make, regionals and then state and then nationals. I made my first national cross country year 9, I think, and my first nationals triathlon in year 7 or 8. And I was just, gradually finding my feet there. I think my first kind of breakthrough performances would have been year 9, year 10, and I was starting to make a state team or two there. But I didn't really shine until after high school. My first kind of, I guess, really big breakout running performances where I think I was 17 or 18 and I ran 14:30 and I made my first big Australian team, if you like. I'd already been to World Champs Triathlon when I was younger and world school champs for cross country, but my first big Australian team was 2017 Uganda. That was
And that
where,
was cross country, right? Or
yeah, cross country.
yeah.
That was a really cool experience. I love that.
Yeah. Well, do you have like a favorite out of track, road, and cross?
At the moment, I'd like to say road. I think it's the most interesting, and I've probably had the most success on the road, especially in the last couple of years. While some of my track races have been great, I don't think that there just isn't a lot of cross country here, and not a lot of people tend to actually race the big cross country races, particularly in New South Wales, where the road you get a lot. I think because there's money, there's a lot more competition, which is another reason why I like it more.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, yeah, running has like grown significantly in the past couple of years, especially since COVID. And yeah, most people are probably getting into road because that's probably the easiest thing you can get into with all the big marathons and road races. And yeah, like track seems a little, I feel like there's still like a bit of a barrier to entry, even though there might not actually be. Like it's hard to get the info on how to get into those races. And cross country, like you said, it's not as big here. Yeah, road just seems to be the thing. So it kind of makes sense. Yeah.
I'd say also track is a bit more intimidating for someone that's just started running because you're around a track, you're around a 400-meter circuit with a lot of people potentially watching you. You're having to put spikes on. Whereas on the road, while there's people watching, often it's your friends and people are going to be more looking up the front. I'd say as well, the reason why a lot of athletes tend to gravitate towards the road is, as you know, running is probably not the most financially lucrative or well supported endeavor, it's particularly in Australia if you compare to other countries. So for the people like myself that just want to actually stay in the sport so that we can progress, we've got to go where the money is. So if there was more money in track than road, we'd probably be there instead.
Yeah, that is super true and not talked about enough as well. Because yeah,
No,
I think yeah, not much money in the sport of running, and I wish that would change in the future as well. Because it's not only at the elite level, like it gives more opportunities for everyone in the sport as well if there's more money, like better events and
exactly.
all that sort of stuff. So yeah,
And it grows the sport too, because the more you see the elites around turning up and racing, the more you see big running races, the more people are going to want to run and the more people are going to want to turn up and watch too. And I hear people saying, why aren't there more athletes turning up to things like the New South Wales cross country champs or the even the athletics these days? There is a couple of reasons. I think one of them is money. Because if you're winning a state championship, like an open state championship and it's a financial loss, people aren't going to want to keep turning up. Whereas if you can go make a few $1,000s in a road race, it's going to be, I guess, a more viable option, especially if you're struggling for money.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it's so I can imagine it is super hard to like train at the level you are while also having to juggle everything else because
Yeah,
it does require a lot of time investment. It's not just running. You have to like recover because that's a huge part of running as well. If there's no
definitely the
money, it's
recovery.
hard. Yeah.
It's because time-wise, a lot of high performing athletes do have really effective time management skills and they're very committed. So yes, they while it's not ideal, they can have a 12-hour day of, two training sessions, working in uni or whatever they've got on, but it's just not viable for the recovery, and that's something that's not talked about enough. So you can have
Yeah.
guys that really want to get to the next level, but they can't because they're stuck working a casual job just so they can put food on the table. Whereas if you look over in America or Europe, you've got anyone that's making a top 10 or, I'm just putting a number out there, but it's even someone that's performing moderately well is going to be on some funding or be having a sponsor or getting more opportunities. And I think to keep seeing some progress in Australian athletics, we do need to actually get some more money into the sport so that your talented juniors and your even people my age can actually stay in the sport and progress.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's kind of sad that like in running, unless you're like super into it, people only see the people that come like first, and then like some people wouldn't even be able to name or know of the people that come second or third. So yeah, that
Yeah,
also just goes to show that there's still a long way to go in like the sport of running. And speaking of actually, I know that because of this, well, this might not be the sole reason, but both of us are we might not be insane entrepreneurs yet, but we're both into that sort of stuff where we have our own
yeah,
business and try and build our brand. And so maybe, yeah, I think it's a good time to talk a bit about Envialo and your vision with it and why you started as well. But then we'll go
sure.
into the injury that you
Yeah,
recently had.
sounds good. So you can see behind me, this is Envialo. I'm going to move the screen down. That's a solid view of the singlets. So I was injured for about a year or two. And at that time, I really lost my sense of self-identity. I've always been just an athlete. That's who I am. That's what I've wanted. When you lose that, you do have to sit down and think about what else you want with your life. And at that point, I really didn't know. And I should say that there's some crazy epiphany or story or reason that it's a clothing brand, but it isn't. I've always been creative and it just came to me one day and I thought I really want to do this. And since that day, there hasn't been a day where I didn't want to do this. I've never had a day where I go, oh, I don't want to work on my clothing brand or maybe I should do something else. I think it's a synergy between creating really high quality pieces that are at the cutting edge of technology and that kind of creative expression. Because I feel like a lot of running clothes are quite boring. I don't want to be negative here, but they are. Like they're very simple. There's not a lot of expression in them. So I wanted to make something that was a cross between a fashion label and an activewear label, and that's where this comes in.
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, you put a lot of effort into the quality of your product. Like I've seen on the stories that, yeah, you're trying to make sure that you have the highest quality material and also adding that spin to it, like you said, with the design. I think it's pretty cool that some of your merch kind of represents or looks like it came from football or soccer. And I kind of like that spin on it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, look, a lot of like what I'm wearing now. I'll bring the camera down for a second. This is a retro soccer jersey that I designed. And you're right, a lot of this comes from when I see all the retro soccer jerseys and I see some of the clothing from the 90s. There's some really cool stuff there that I want to bring into running. Because in a lot of other spaces, like your soccer jerseys, like your fashion brands, they'll put their own unique spin on something. But when I see running clothes, that's just isn't there. So part of my kind of mission is to bring fashion into running. And that really, I'd say it hasn't really been done before. There's definitely some companies that are starting to get into it, like Bandit Running and Satisfy Running are definitely starting to edge into that direction. But the way I'm doing is I'm really going hard on it. There's no kind of conservatism or holding back. I'm just going to make cool stuff. There's no limit here, if you know what I mean. I'm just going
Yeah,
to
for sure.
make make what I want to make, and I think that's the beauty of it. There's some real freedom. I'm not bound by a board of executives telling me what I can and can't do. It's just if I want to release something and people like it, they can buy it.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's kind of an interesting situation right now because like a lot of big brands know that they can get away with not having the best quality products anymore and people will still buy just because they're a huge brand. So I think
Yeah,
that creates a huge opportunity for the smaller brands to prove that quality matters and like hopefully we can build up both of our brands and yeah, get somewhere
definitely.
epic.
I was going to say this is a bit of kind of secret sauce for anyone else that's an entrepreneur out there. When it feels overwhelming in terms of, hey, how on earth am I going to compete with one of these big brands like Nike or Adidas or On? The answer is you don't. And when I say you don't, I don't mean that you stop trying. I mean that when you try and compete with them, you're playing their game in a sense, like you're trying to do what they're doing, which even if you're more wealthy than I am, if you're just one person, it's never going to work. What you need to do is change the game and make your own rules. So instead of going, okay, I can't do what Nike can do in terms of a global trillion-dollar company, go and connect with people in your area and go and find ways and do things that they can't do because they're bound by a whole board of executives and a mission statement and etc. Whereas if you're a single person or a group of three friends, you can release what you want. You can turn up to parkrun and start giving out singlets. You can do drop singlets on whatever day of the week you want, and that's where your advantage is over them. So, use it.
Yeah, I feel like there's more of a face to the actual brand. Like when you think about Nike, yes, obviously you have those big names behind the brand, but yeah, like you're the runner and you're making the products as well. And I think that's, yeah, a huge advantage that smaller businesses have as well. And small
Yeah.
businesses know that we need to keep the quality up because we don't have that huge audience. So yeah, I think that keeps us on our toes and makes sure that everything that we do is high quality, which is what sets us apart, which is good.
And people buy off a person. Especially in the modern day, I saw this really interesting study saying that people aged between 18 and 40 don't trust traditional marketing. I think it was 80 to 90% do not trust traditional marketing in that age group. What they do want to see is a face behind the brand. And if you're Nike, that is really hard to do because you're everywhere and you've got so many employees and products. Whereas if you're me or you, it is I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's definitely achievable to be documenting the process and people can see that they're buying off you. So that they're going to trust the person and they're going to see you in their own physical space. It's actually a huge advantage if you're growing a brand to actually connect with your customers because you know them by their names.
100%. And yeah, just to wrap up on this Envialo a bit, tell the listeners like if they're interested, are there any products out yet or what's the timeline on all this?
Okay, so my first drop was a few months ago, and that was some hoodies and t-shirts. That was kind of my debut, and that was my introduction, just trying to get some product out there. We are going to have some running gear coming, and it's going to be very good. So in the next few months, you're going to be able to buy some of these behind me. So I've got two different colors of running singlet coming out. I'll also have some shirts, some long sleeves, and we'll be doing some more hoodies as well. And then come summer, we're going to have some soccer, retro vintage football soccer jerseys. So if you want to get involved, jump on the Instagram and on the TikTok accounts. That's where I'll be keeping you guys up to date with what's going on. And in the next, I'd like to say 8 weeks, you'll be able to actually try some of these for yourself. And
Awesome.
the
So yeah, it was Envialo Track Club on Instagram, right?
Yes, it's Envialo Track Club. That's the clothing label. So you can see it's got a real running basis behind it. And this is made of a European fabric put together in China and then designed by me in Australia. And that's the real cool thing about it. You're not buying it off a board of executives in, some in another country. You're buying it off a guy that spent hours making this in his bedroom and poring over every little detail. I've tested it, which I'll tell you about later. So
100%.
look forward to it. I'm going to be racing in some of these too. So if you're in a race and you want to have a look, come say hey and I'll show you what it's about.
Yeah, awesome. So you told us that you started this clothing label, yeah, because of your injury, which obviously set you back quite a few years. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was significant. But yeah, let's just go to 2021. You had like an insane year. You probably cleaned every big race there was in Sydney. Like we're talking road races, like Sydney 10, where I took photos. And the funny thing is, because I'm a photographer and videographer, I got to witness pretty much every single race that you did in Sydney. Yeah, we're talking 3K champs, 5K champs. I don't know, list everything else that you did and what sort of stuff you achieved.
Yeah, so 2021 was definitely probably my best year ever of running. I think my absolute best year in history will hopefully be in front of me. But yeah, that year, I think I raced, it was either 13 or 15 times, and I medaled in almost all of them. And I would have won at least half of them, or if not more, which is a pretty good average. I won state 5K in just under 14 minutes. I won state 3K. I won Sydney 10 and broke Ben St. Lawrence's record, which that record still stands. Won Run West as well and broke the record there. I medaled at Launceston 10. Oh, what else? I'm trying to remember everything I've done now.
Were you in Box Hill as well?
Yeah,
For quite a
Box,
stacked race. Yeah.
yeah, Box Hill. Like I didn't, my placing wasn't very high, but I ran a PB there.
1350. Yeah.
Yeah,
Crazy time. Yeah.
I broke a couple of PBs there. There were quite a few races.
Yeah.
I only really had, I think there was two races that didn't go very well, three, and I was injured for those. Otherwise, all my on my bad day, I would medal. On a good day, I'd win. Narrabeen, that was the other one. There's a Narrabeen track meet where I was meant to just do the 1500. I won that, and
And then you
then
did the 5K.
a couple of minutes later, I did the 5K and won that too. That
Yeah.
was pretty cool. I didn't.
Yeah.
That was a pretty cool feeling to race like that. And then a few weeks later, it was state three.
Yeah,
I was
that's
doing some
awesome.
crazy sessions that year too. I remember there was one where I did. I think it was like a 12 or 13K tempo at 3 minute Ks, and I was talking during it like it was an aerobic run. There's a session around what's known by the local guys around Belrose as Dog Park. I ran 3K, 2K, 1K, and my 3K I think was 8:17. My 2K was like five, I think it was 5:18 or 5:20 or something, and then my 1K was 2:30.
That is crazy.
And that's when I thought, okay, I'm in really good shape. I could probably run under 13:30 for 5K, which did match up with the rest of my training. But unfortunately, while I got to race a few more times before I was injured, I wasn't really given the opportunity to run fast.
Yeah, for sure. So you had that crazy year. Talk about how it's even possible to go from that to out for like a good few years. So yeah, give us like a brief timeline because I know you've had a crazy story and I've had a brief understanding of it, but I still find it hard to comprehend because it's just insane.
Yeah, so quick summary, the conditions I had were chronic exertional compartment syndrome and popliteal artery entrapment syndrome. I will explain them for the listeners for a minute because obviously not everyone comes from a medical or sports science background. So that year, the first time I had any symptoms was August, September 2022. Keep in mind, I had been injured since June with some hip and lower back issues. and then ITB syndrome. But essentially, the way it started was very early on in runs. I had some really intense shin and calf pain while running, and I'd literally take my shoes off and my feet would be completely ischemic, which means deoxygenated. So they'd be white and purple, and literally a week or two into these symptoms, my feet would be completely numb after a run. We didn't know what this was at this stage because these conditions, particularly popliteal artery entrapment, are very rare. Like most people don't get them, and if they do get them, it's a career ender, especially popliteal artery entrapment. So for these, I was getting testing and in hospital and at the doctors for probably a couple of times a week for a couple of months. So it's quite disruptive to life, I guess. But I'll go into what they are. First diagnosis was chronic exertional compartment syndrome. That was November 2022. I've written a couple of notes here just to put the details in, I guess. Compartment syndrome involves pressure in the actual compartment that contains the muscle, basically progressively rising and rising, eventually causing ischemia and more severe cases like mine, it actually starts to cut off some blood supply. So that was my first diagnosis. We knew that this may need surgery or at least some Botox, but we were relieved that it wasn't the popliteal artery entrapment, in the words of Dad, because that was likely going to be a career ender. And the symptoms kept getting worse, and at that point, I couldn't run it all. I couldn't run it all, and not only could I not run it all, but I could barely walk. My life was pretty much on hold by this stage. And then the popliteal artery entrapment diagnosis came shortly after, and that was kind of early December. Popliteal artery entrapment, it's extremely rare. It's only treatable by a bunch of operations, not just one, and they're high risk. Like they're on the scale of things for that kind of surgery, they're at the top of risk.
Obviously, your dad said that popliteal artery syndrome would be career ending. So, yeah, how was it when you realized? Because that must have been the toughest news you've had your whole life, probably.
Oh yeah. And Dad wasn't the only one to say that either.
Mm.
I saw, in terms of surgeons, I spoke to 6 or 7 surgeons and probably 20 to 30 doctors and all sorts of other medical professionals because as I mentioned, I was in hospital all the time. It was pretty devastating. I felt like I'd lost my sense of identity without having a pity party and going on and on. It was a very difficult time. It was very testing, and the only way I kind of got through it was looking into what can I do to fix this. I'm very stubborn in terms of my goal. So I just kept sitting down and going, okay, how do I fix this? What do I have to do? I have to think, even if there's a 1% chance of this working, I've got to do it because there's no alternative. I might just describe what popliteal artery entrapment is. Popliteal artery entrapment, your popliteal artery is the artery that supplies basically all of the blood or blood flow below the knee. And what happened with mine is there's a couple of anatomical variations that are all genetic that have caused this. Essentially, let's see. Ah, yes, I was remembering the number now. So I had luminal narrowing of this popliteal artery of 75%. And when I'd get on an ultrasound, there would be full occlusion of this artery during a calf raise, which means when you run, no blood flow. You've got no blood below the knee. So it's a problem. And essentially what was happening was I had 2 muscles by the name of plantaris and gastrocnemius that were actually pressing down or compressing this neurovascular bundle and squeezing it like a vice. So, and when you bend your knee, which is tibiofemoral flexion, it would squeeze it more. And that was the issue, was that these muscles wouldn't move. You couldn't really do anything to move them apart from remove them. And I had to that's what happened. They ended up being removed.
Yeah, so just to, I guess, explain it in a different way in case it helps any of the listeners, what basically was happening is occlusion of a blood vessel just means that you're getting way less blood to the muscles, and that means less oxygen. And without the oxygen supplied to the muscles, like it's pretty much impossible to do any form of exercise. And the fact that it was 75% occluded, but then when you do a calf raise, it's pretty much fully occluded, just means no ability to be able to do any exercise. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah, to add that on top of what you already had is just yeah, crazy.
Yeah, the thing is with mine, at its worst, it was fully occluded even while standing up.
Right.
And
Yeah.
with a it kind of got worse very quickly to the point where, to be very honest with everyone listening, my life was gone. Even not just as an athlete, but as a human being. I couldn't drive to the shops, I couldn't walk, I couldn't see my friends, I could barely even walk to the bathroom. This was even before surgery. I was literally bedbound. To give you guys an idea, that was for a couple of months. So it was quite isolating. But yeah, by the end of that, before the surgery, essentially what was happening was I had imagine this, no oxygen below the knee. That's the simplest way of saying it. It's that blood vessel's pretty much cut off.
Just crazy to hear. And now that we're on the other end of it and just seeing what you've already run since the injury is seriously mind-blowing. And considering that a lot of people are saying that it will be career ending, is just crazy to think that you're even running. Yeah, it makes it really, really easy to root for you and your brand as well, especially when you tell us what you've been through and the fact that this clothing label started from, yeah, just you being clueless to what to do next, and then you thought of this. So yeah, full respect to you to get through all that. And yeah, is there any other detail like timeline wise?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for that, Soda. I appreciate it. And I appreciate being able to come on here and tell my story because I think there's a lot of people that probably don't know much about what happened. And a lot of people, when I first came back into the running community, were really confused as to where I've gone because I didn't put anything on social media at the time because I just wasn't in the right headspace. I think it's safe to say I was quite depressed when this happened, as anyone would be. I knew that at some point it was likely to end, and I was hopefully going to come back into it or at least, get some of my normal life back. But at the time, I was in a bit of a hole, as anyone would be. So it's really nice to be back in a better place now. And in terms of details about this, I think perhaps for some of the people that have been saying, oh, why aren't you running faster? Or how does this really take you out for that long? For most people, as I've said before, it's career ending, but this literally took me out for years. So when I say it's taken me out for years, it was a year or more of zero running or exercise, and it takes years to recover from because essentially what's happened is I've had some of my legs removed. Plantaris, which is a knee stabilizer, is gone now. Part of gastroc is gone. I've had a bunch of fasciotomies, which are basically making little holes in the muscle compartments to relieve the pressure. And then I've had to relearn to walk completely. So it was like relearning to walk as a baby again. It was pretty crazy. I had to relearn to walk and then relearn to run and actually rebuild my body. So
Yeah.
it's a
You,
very interesting place to be because part of me is thinking, wow, I've actually managed to do something that most people or almost no one has done in terms of like I'm actually running again at a reasonable speed. You've got the other half of me, which is the imposter syndrome saying, well, you used to run a lot faster than this. You shouldn't be happy with this. So it's like this mental battle of, do I be happy with my progress or do I be not satisfied? And you have to find that balance.
yeah, 100%. It's just a runner thing to always want to be
Yeah.
better and yeah, be in the best shape of your life. But I feel like just knowing how far you come already gives me a lot of confidence that you will be back running your best ever times, which will be a huge story as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely rooting for you.
Thank you. To anyone else out there with an injury, I think it's good to see something like what's happened to me because if someone like myself can overcome something like this, I think some of the stress fractures and some of the other injuries and even something similar, it shows other people that they can do it. And that was another reason why I didn't kind of dip out of the sport is I thought, well, what would younger me say to this and what would all these other people do if they get the same thing? It's if someone like myself just dipped and said, well, my career's done, which is fair enough. A whole lot of other people might do the same. So I wanted to try and lead by example and show other people that they can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think just because of how crazy of a year you had in 2021, it is sometimes sad to see that like you get all this attention when you're like running super well, and then like people wouldn't even notice that you've been gone for 3 years sometimes. Obviously,
Yeah.
your your close ones will know and they'll check in. And I remember having a convo with you on Messenger or something about a year ago when I was back in Japan as well. And we were just talking about life and the future because yeah, I'd left Australia temporarily without wanting to, and yeah, I was like a bit in the dumps as well. But I think having that convo with you, just yeah, the fact that you were going through something way, way, way harder, like gave me a bit of motivation to get out the slump and kind of yeah, get stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that too, and I was actually really hoping I'd get to actually catch up with you again. But on the topic of, I guess the attention to how well you're running, it was a real difficult time for me in terms of I was used to probably having a few more friends around, seeing more people, and all sorts of people that I thought were my friend at the time were only really friends with me because I was running well, and they were only really talking to me because I was running well. And I'm definitely not naming any names here because I've had plenty of good friends too, but for anyone that's an athlete, they'll know that when you do hit that rock bottom and you either your performances drop or you get injured, it's a really big adjustment mentally because you go from wow, everyone's talking to me and wanting to take photos and know who I am and what I'm doing to it feels like no one cares at times. And even though you got your family and your close friends, it's a big jump. It kind of shows you who your real friends are.
Yeah. And it's not just like the people, but even like the media as well, like because
Yeah,
they're posting about you all the time and all that, and then there's just suddenly no talk, or yeah, people might not even reach out because they don't care unless you're performing at your best, which I imagine
yeah.
happens a little bit at the top level. Obviously, I don't know from experience because I've never competed at that high of a level, but yeah.
Look, if there's one thing about me, I'm always honest. And at what I'd call the top level, in my experience, it happens an awful lot, like way more than people would think. Even with actual friends. I think for people that aren't in the elite level of sport, it's both a very cool place to be, but it's actually a very difficult place to be. I think when people see elite athletes, they go, oh, they've got the best, easiest life. They've got everything handed to them on a platter. They just have to perform. It's really not what it's made out to be. It can be both quite lonely and quite difficult, especially in those times where you're not doing well. Of course, when you're winning, great, awesome. But when you're not or when you're injured, it can be probably one of the more difficult careers to have, I'd say. Not
Yeah.
saying I'm not privileged to be able to run and, try and build my business because I love that and it is a great privilege, especially after my injury. But yes, for everyone listening, there is a lot of kind of materialism, if you like, at the top level of sport.
Yeah.
People don't care about you unless you're winning, and they forget you very quickly, very quickly.
Yeah. I wonder how much the fact that the highs are super high makes the lows feel even lower, Like there's polar ends of the spectrum. Whereas in a regular job, like office job, just for example, it's kind of the same thing, routine. So you don't get those extreme highs or extreme lows. So I guess there's
Yeah.
pros and cons to both. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. There's in elite sport, and this is similar to being an entrepreneur as well. When you're running a really big business, the highs are higher, and because of that, your emotional spectrum is wider. Because I feel like when you're feeling a certain emotion, this is getting a bit psychology based now because it's been part of my degree. But when you go from one place to another psychologically, it's not just the new emotion you're feeling. It's like a maths equation. You're taking the difference between the old one and the new one. So if you're used to feeling very elated on top of the world and then you go to feeling a bit depressed, that feeling of being a bit depressed or down is going to feel a lot worse for someone that's just come off a high versus someone that's been at baseline. And that's the danger of being an elite athlete or a high performer in any industry. You really have to know how to regulate your emotions. If you can't self-regulate your emotions and, learn when to pull back and understand yourself, it's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah. And can you talk a bit about like, because I know I've had a chat with you about this, so I know like roughly how much you've gotten back into shape and all that. But yeah, maybe just use Ed Goddard as a reference because he's been winning a lot
Sure.
recently. I just like to how close you're getting back to him because I know he's a good friend and you can talk about this.
Yeah. So I would say I'm progressing and I'm catching up. I'm not there yet, I would say, but I'm getting closer. When I first started running, which was kind of middle of last year again, that was my first run. I could not run for more than 10 or 20 meters, and maybe we can pop a video of this up, but it looked terrible. Like it looked like not only had I never run before, but it looked like I had some major probably balance and cognitive issues. I was, looking at that, you'd think his career is done. But so I've kind of progressed very gradually in terms of my training and my speed. And I think the first time I would say I ran even somewhat fast was only a few months ago. And I've gone from one of my first races back, which was Sydney 10, and I was, pretty much 2 minutes behind, or over 2 minutes behind Ed. I've more than halved that gap in racing. Look, my last race still probably wasn't quite as fit, not quite a reflection of how fit I am, but I was about a minute behind there. And in training, I've caught up more than that. I'd say I'm close to Ed now, but not as fit. So if you imagine the gap as 100%, I think I've caught up maybe 80% to 90% of where the gap is, and I've just got to kind of pick off that last 10% or so, or last 5%.
Yeah, which is again going back to everything, it's just crazy. And yeah, it's good that you still have like your friends like Ed that you train with on a Tuesday sometimes to yeah, have a reference point as to where you're up to. Obviously, you'll know with your own times as well, but yeah, just because you're familiar with some of your close friends that you've been running with since you were a kid, it must be nice to just have that company and reference point.
Oh, definitely. I think one of the things I do love about running is it is still a social sport, or at least it can be. And having these guys around to train with has really helped me get some confidence back and learn to actually enjoy the sport. Because when I started back, I was running pretty much all by myself and I was struggling to actually just run. I couldn't even run a kilometer. So having the boys around to run with and that network has really helped me kind of grow and want to keep running.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that you're always thinking about what's next and all that. I feel like you've had a lot of different ideas in the past. I think at one stage you wanted to open up your own gym as well. Like, is that still
Yeah.
something that you want to do in the horizon?
Yes. So interestingly, one of the only benefits I got from this injury was I became through a lot of self-reflection and time on the couch. And I think the pure principle of losing that sense self-identity, as I mentioned, helped me decide what I wanted in life. So I've got a very clear picture of what I want in the next 10 years now. One of
Yeah.
them is owning a bit of an exercise science slash gym facility for training, rehab, injury management, performance testing, all of that. Probably do something online with that too. So to answer your question, yes, the plan is still to have my own exercise science business along with my clothing brand. They're the kind of two businesses that I'm looking at running in the next 10 years, along with running in itself.
Yeah. Going back to what you said, like it's kind of hard to when you are injured, it's so hard to detach from that running identity because like no matter how much people say that it's important to have a life outside of running and all that, like as runners, it's just hard, you know? Like running is a big part of our lives and fair enough because we take it seriously and we want to do well. And I feel like that's already a super hard barrier to overcome. But I'm glad that you found a lot of goals that you want in the near and long-term future. Because yeah, I feel like the exercise science stuff, I think that'll be cool. The performance testing and all that. And I reckon you can scale that business pretty big and get like proper employees and yeah,
That's
really
the
grow
plan.
that.
Yeah. I think people forget with athletes when they say, oh, I've had this said to me by a few people before, oh, you're obsessed with running, you're obsessed with success. But the people that at that top level that are winning the big races, like your Ed Goddards, your Brett Robinsons, your Stewies, your Ollie Hoares, Jake Kiplimos, etc., they don't realize that to be at that level, you have to be obsessed. And when you're that obsessed with something and you spend all your time on it, of course, that is going to become your identity. So while you do want to have some sense of self outside of that, a lot of your sense of confidence is going to be based off what you do with your life because that's where you spend your time and that's where you spend your thoughts. So
Yeah.
it's great to have something else, and I'm grateful that I've managed to do that. But I think people need to remember that elite athletes do put most of their self-worth into what they do because that's if they didn't, they wouldn't be successful.
100%. I think every little decision that you make in a day adds up to the performance. So, yeah, like
Yeah,
we touched on earlier, recovery is a huge part of running. And again, you have to make the right decisions outside of running to still help with your running. So, your running just ends up being a lifestyle when you do take it seriously and want performance and when you're performing at a high level. And even if you're performing at a sub-elite level, like you still need to do all these little things outside of running to help with your running still to become better. So yeah, totally see where you're coming from there.
of course, everything counts, whether it's your sleep, your diet, what you're doing for your recovery, whether you're staying up late or going out or something. Every little bit counts when you're trying to win.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, tell us maybe a couple things that you just learned from having this injury and also coming back from it. Like I guess one thing for sure is like you must have appreciated that your dad works in the industry that he does because he gave you a lot of insight as well. But yeah, what else did you learn?
Yeah, so I think I started my uni degree before this injury happened, but I think I've become more interested and involved in the exercise science and sports medicine side of things. I've learned a lot about my body and learned a lot about rehab, certainly. I think I've learned a lot about myself too, in terms of kind of the resilience and mental strength side and what matters to me as a person and what I want with my life, as I mentioned. I've now got I think before this injury, while I was always a runner and wanted to be an elite runner, I didn't really know what else I wanted. And now I've got a very clear picture of and direction I want to go in, which is awesome. I guess the other side of me people don't know is the creativity. Like I make my own music. I play guitar, do a bit of house and house tech house music, do a bit of rapping. I think there's a people would really benefit from getting to know athletes as a person. I think that would really help the sport of running grow. Because that's why, like, if you look at something like Coffee Club with Ollie and Morgan and Geordie Beamish, people really love that because they're seeing these athletes as people. And that's what's so good about what we're doing here is that they get to know our personalities rather than just our running achievements.
Yeah, exactly. I think as a big running fan and I look into people's lives a bit more, that's why I'm so invested in all these running races that happen worldwide as well, but even more so for races within Australia, because I've had the privilege of being a photographer, and naturally because of that, I've had the privilege of talking to a few more elite runners, especially within Sydney, and getting closer to them, and inevitably you just get to know more about them, and you start rooting for them more. Whereas the average person looking at a race is going to know absolutely nothing apart from the guy that might win. So, yeah, I think that's why it's important for the sport to grow. We just need more personality behind everything. And again, that's why the media stuff is important. And yeah, the YouTube, the TikTok, and Instagram, it's kind of cool to just see what other people are up to.
Yeah, there's some really interesting people in the running community. Like a lot of my close friends are, well, all my close friends are runners actually. And there's some real characters. There's so many people doing cool things. They've got all sorts of cool interests. There's some really intelligent people around. You're very right in the sense that I think that these athletes in running have got so much more to offer than just their running. And that would really help us grow if people can actually see someone like myself or Ed or Josh as actual people, which it sounds silly to say, but if you think about it, when you see guys like us race, often you don't, that's all you see. You see us winning, you see us as some person that you'll probably never be able to go for a run with because, hey, oh, they're too fast or they live, 100 kilometers away. But in reality, someone down the road that I've never met might have the same interest as me outside of running, and we could have lots to talk about on a run. But it's hard to actually get that across if all they see is the racing.
The funny thing is, like, you can actually run with elite runners. Like they do a lot of their runs slow as well. So I
Yeah,
think
my
that's
job is
another
slow.
barrier I want to break. And hopefully me doing those YouTube videos with people like Josh, Ed, and yourself, hopefully more of in the future, that will give a better understanding for everyone that like the running community doesn't have to be so isolated between elite runners and the regular runner. Like we can have much
Yeah.
more overlap and all that.
I'd I'd love to see more of the bigger groups, even the elite groups working together too. I mean, the group I jog with has a really diverse range of speeds and distances. We'll do Sunday long runs at anything between 4 minute Ks and 440s, and there's 8:15 guys, there's marathon runners, there's everything in between. There's younger guys, older guys. We pretty much anyone's welcome. I think it would be good to see some more community because that you're right, there is a bit of a gap between your average runner and then say, or like a normal person, I guess, and an elite runner. And often it's actually the elite runners that end up doing more solo running than the actual, I guess, person that does it as a hobby or as for fun. So it'd be good to actually mix it in and, see some more community there for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And sorry for jumping back and forth, but I
But
think in your 2021 year, with all the good performances, I'm kind of wanting to unpack more there just because I'm so curious to know what it's like to be at that level and stuff. But one thing as a running coach nowadays, I'm always curious about is mentality and how much does the mental side and mental strength, self-efficacy and all that come into play with performing well in running?
a lot, a lot more than people think. You can be extreme. Look, I'll put it like this. Obviously, to run well, you need to do the training. You need to be fit. You need to put yourself together in terms of like building a house. You put the bricks together. If you imagine that one thing that can knock the house over or make it stronger, it's the mental side. You could literally be the fittest person there and ruin your entire race with a weak mentality or even just not mentally preparing the right way. And you're right, it's not talked about enough. I think a lot of athletes can be really fit and actually just ruin their day over, mental games or lack of self-confidence or lack of ability to regulate their own emotions. And especially when you go to that elite level, there is a lot of pressure there when you've got a lot of people talking about you. You've got different videos or interviews with, about your race before or after. It's very easy to get caught up in that. And, if you listen to someone that might be a bit older that's not used to all this media, they would just say, oh, just give it a miss, don't go near it. But it's not really possible because when you're building your brand as an athlete and being involved, you have to be on your phone and you have to be on Instagram. You have to be engaging with all this stuff. So it's learning how to regulate and you almost have to emotionally separate yourself from some of this stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm sure like something that's obvious to you might not be obvious to the people listening. So can you list like maybe a couple more things that you think really helped in that year to just perform so consistently and super high level?
Sure. The first obvious one is consistent training because anyone can put together a few weeks of good training, but putting together long-term good training that's high quality is much more of a challenge. And that's where the whole picture, you have to look at training holistically, where it comes back to everything you do in your life is part of training. And what separates the high performer from the someone that's almost made it is they do everything they need to do to run well all the time. Whereas someone that's doing well or almost made it will do it either most of the time or only when they feel like it. So it's having the discipline to not just do the training, but do the recovery, the sleep, the nutrition, the mental preparation, 7 days a week through every day of the year without fail. I think the second thing that really helped me was I was actually racing a bit more. I think some people shy away from racing because they don't want to taper or they're nervous or they want to wait until they're fit. But I was really trying to take every opportunity and run fast. And more importantly, I think I was really enjoying running that year. Like I had a lot of friends to run with. There were some really good races. I was really focused on running, but I was having fun with it. I've had other years where I think I've been too focused on performance and not and forgotten to actually enjoy the sport, and it's actually been my downfall. So yeah, you really got to find that balance between it meaning the world to you and wanting to run fast and actually enjoying it. Because I think when you enjoy it, you run better.
Yeah, that's thinking more like long term, which is good. You can't do anything that you don't enjoy for a long time. Obviously, consistency is what gives you the amazing performances. So I think that's a very good point. And yeah, stuff that people can take onto their training and hopefully learn from.
One thing I would say, one bad session does not mean you are unfit. I used to think this too. You can have some terrible sessions and then a week later run really well. The only way that that one bad session will actually undo you is if you either don't recover from it properly or you let it knock your confidence. I know you know this, Soda, but for the listeners, when you're looking at or trying to assess how fit you are, you look at long-term trends. You don't just look at a singular session. Obviously, if you've gone and raced and run a really fast time, that is a great indicator that you're fit. When you're looking at, oh, my heart rate was a bit lower on this easy run, or this session was a couple of seconds quicker, that's a very small indicator of potential fitness. You want to look at the trends of, what you've done over the last 6 months.
How you feel every day is so varied depending on so many factors. And there's just
Yeah.
no way to pinpoint one day and then use that as a reference point of where you're at because like all this stuff like sleep, diet, and stress levels, like external stress, and all those small things kind of add up and then decide how you're feeling on the day. And that's going to change every single day. You can have a bad day followed by a super good day as well. So I think that's another good thing to, yeah, point out. So thank you for that.
Guys,
And
you can run fast and feel bad. You can be feeling terrible and still run really quick. That's another misconception. Some days I've woken up literally feeling like I've been hit by a bus and then gone and had a really good session. Even in the warm up, I've literally felt like I should pull the pin on the session and then I go and run faster than I have before. So I think that's where the mentality comes in of sometimes you just have to do it anyway and you surprise yourself. You just have to go through the motions and realize that sometimes your body's like a car. Some of these warning lights are very important. You should listen to them. Then some of these other warning lights are absolute crap and they mean nothing and you should ignore them. And there's a real skill in learning which of these warning signs are actually the ones you should listen to.
yeah, that's another good point. Yeah. And running shoe wise, what are you enjoying at the moment? I know you said recently that you love the Alpha Fly for racing, but I'm always curious what people like you are wearing for training.
Yeah, so for racing, Alpha Fly and Next Percent on the road, kind of move in between them. Definitely Alpha Fly for longer races. Training wise, I'm doing a lot of running in the Nova Blast. That's probably one of my favorite jogging shoes. I used to love Tempo Next Percents until they discontinued them. They would have been one of my favorite all-time shoes. I've gone through a few pairs of Invincibles, Pomeros, even some Pegasus Trails because I live in a national park. That'd be my main kind of rotation.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Like you live in such a nice area because I've been running there once and I think it's Pyramid Trail. It's so nice there.
Oh, that's a great one. I run there almost every day.
Yeah, just fire trail and not too much elevation. So yeah, you could probably even do a couple like rolling hill tempo sessions and stuff.
Yeah, we do have West End Road too, which is a great one. So that's a long road, long undulating road with a lot of hills. So I use that as a long run when I want to test my fitness or just add some more difficulty into the equation. So you can do a 25, 30K run there and get 700 to 1,000 meters of elevation, which is pretty solid.
Yeah. And
Race the
maybe
sun.
while we're on the topic of training, like what's your ideal training week from Monday to Sunday?
I'd look, if I was going to speak completely idealistically, I'd love to live in Kenya or Flagstaff, but in terms of the actual training, Monday, Wednesday, Friday are my aerobic runs. Sometimes I'll double there, and I'm then doing 3 sessions a week. Tuesday is kind of my most intense session, which is VO2 max work. That's at Gore Hill with the boys. Thursday is usually 25 by 400 or something similar, but that's more of a controlled speed. Then Saturday, I'm doing a longer tempo or threshold. Sometimes that's just one continuous run, sometimes it's broken. Sunday's our 2 hour long run. So I'm spending probably most of my mileage running slower, but there's definitely a fair bit of moderate to high intensity work, all regulated by a number of different scientific parameters.
For sure. 25 by 400 sounds like a crazy long session. I mean, 10Ks of work, just doing the same
Yeah.
thing over and over again. Do you do that on the track?
If I can, it's a bit hard to get access to one at the moment with what's happening on the northern beaches. But yes, if I can do it on track, I'll do it on track. Otherwise, I'll do it on like a grass oval or even a treadmill. It's all off short recovery too, so the 400s are off a 2 minute cycle.
Mm,
So there's
yeah.
not a lot of recovery time there, which means you do have to be very careful with your intensity regulation.
Yeah, 100%. That's just like another kind of LT2 session, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm running them at the moment. Most of them are between 68 to 70, I'd like to say.
Yeah. Mm. I think Matt Hangzer is a big fan of that sort of workout.
He loves his Lactate Pro 2 analyzer. I've actually got the same one. They're great.
Yeah. Do you use it that often or not really?
I wouldn't say I use it really often, but I do use it.
Mm.
Sometimes I'll go through periods where I use it a couple of times a week. Sometimes I won't touch it for a couple of weeks. It's really depending on what I'm doing. Now that my training is very standardized, I may not touch it for a few weeks and then I'll come back and have another look. It's a
Yeah,
bit of both.
cool. And yeah, just to wrap up the episode, you touched on earlier that you have some big goals in the future. And yeah, you may have touched on some of it already, but just remind us like in 5, 10 years, what do you really want to achieve running and outside of running?
Sure. I think firstly, I want to find out how fast I can run. I know that's a very simplistic goal, but at the end of the day, things like world champs, Olympics, just races in general can disappear or be cancelled, or maybe it's not your day. So I just want to know how good I can be and leave nothing to be questioned. I'd like to be in the Olympics. I'd like to leave behind a bit of a legacy in terms of likely something like an Australian record. Non-running wise, I'm definitely going down the business route. So owning a really successful exercise science business in terms of a gym and a rehab facility would be awesome. And being able to actually really visibly help some people and help them to stay in sport and be healthy would be good. Thirdly, moving back to Envialo, I want to grow Envialo into a globally recognized brand known for three things. One, the quality and actually merging quality with that creativity. I think that's probably the number one side. That's the big side of Envialo of what we have to offer. The other side of it is I want to represent the people. I know we had this chat at Sydney Harbour 10, but when I was running at my best, I felt like I was repping all these brands that had no clue who I am, despite having some success. So I want to see people in Sydney actually repping themselves and representing a brand like this. And that's why I'm bringing this to the table so that we can actually, when someone's wearing an Envialo singlet or a shirt or a hoodie, being the owner, I know who they are. So they're representing themselves, they're representing someone that's just like them rather than a big corporation, and they're not giving someone that's profiting billions of dollars and has no idea who they are free representation. So it's about showing other people that they can do something too.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think going down the entrepreneur side of things is a good idea because I think I really came to the realization recently that like all our lives we pay money to learn in school and all that sort of stuff. And then we end up trading our time to get money, and time you can't ever get back. So time is more valuable, you know? Not many people make the next step after that, which is, yeah, starting to trade your money to get some of that time back. And then you really start to have the free range to do whatever you want because you got all this time, you can do whatever you want and set up amazing businesses and, yeah, do some real good things to the world, I think. So respect to
Exactly.
you on, yeah, taking that journey because it's pretty hard to divert from the norm because it is, I guess, safer to trade time for money and yeah, just be stuck at a job. But yeah, it's pretty cool what you're doing. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming on today and opening up about all that. Yeah, it must be hard to talk about it, but it's also pretty cool. And I think it's really beneficial for everyone to hear about what you went through because yeah, there's a lot to be learned from that. And you gave a lot of good tips about running as well, which I'm sure people will appreciate.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Soda. I will say it was while it is a little bit difficult to share some details, because obviously a difficult time, it's also something to be proud of, and I think something that potentially other people might benefit from hearing when they're going through some difficult injuries or challenges in their life. On the entrepreneurial side of things, you're very right. It is somewhat intimidating when you're starting because yes, you're taking more risks, and some people might look down on that and think, no, just get a normal job. But at the end of the day, what this injury taught me is you only get one shot. You got one life, and the last thing you want to do is regret not trying something because you can always go back and get a job if something doesn't work out. There's always more money, there's always more work, but what there isn't is more time. That's the most limited thing we have. And that's why going after these big dreams and goals, I think, is the way to go because you're likely to put more work into them. So I'm really excited to see where you go, where I go, and all the people around us. It's going to be a really cool to see what we can do in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, we've already touched on Envialo Track Club as the Instagram handle, but yeah, where can people find you as well to follow?
So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I mostly post on Instagram. That's my Instagram handle is Kieren Tall. Can pop that up in the left or right corner. And there's Envialo Track Club, which is the Instagram for Envialo. And I will be at a few races too. So if you want to have a look at a single or two and come have a chat, I will be at Sydney Marathon 10K next. So there'll be some Envialo presence there.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for listening, guys. And if I do see anyone that I haven't met before, at a race, would love to come say hello. I want to meet more people and learn more about the running community, especially after being absent for a while. So looking forward to seeing what we can do. Thanks for having me, Soda.
No problem. Actually, I know we just ended the podcast, but I wanted to ask you one more thing because I know you said you were gonna weigh the difference between Envialo singlets and Nike, but how did that go?
It is. So a couple of days ago, I got my samples that I've been working on for many months. And ladies and gentlemen, we've beaten Nike. So an Aero Swift singlet in a size small weighs 54 grams. This one, the Envialo Track Club singlet, weighs 43 grams. So if my maths is correct, that's between 20 and 21% lighter. And
Yeah.
I have wear tested these a few times and had a look at things like core temperature, and the my current kind of consensus is that these actually are more breathable too. There's going to be some more testing data that I'm going to release before I sell these, but so far so good.
All right, cool. Well, I'll be looking forward to it.
Thank you.